The fluorescent hum of the hospital break room was Anya Sharma's constant companion. It was late, past midnight, the kind of hour when shadows stretched long and the world outside seemed to hold its breath. Anya, a nurse in her late 30s, moved with a practiced weariness. Her scrubs a familiar, slightly too large uniform that seemed to swallow her slender frame. Dark circles, etched deep beneath her eyes, spoke of countless nights spent tethered to the relentless rhythm of the oncology ward. Yet, even in her exhaustion, her movements were precise, almost balletic, as she heated her prepackaged dinner, a bland, solitary meal, in the old microwave. The distant, rhythmic beeps of patient monitors were the only other sounds, a constant reminder of the fragile line between life and oblivion that she walked every single shift. She ate alone, seated at a chipped formica table, her gaze fixed on the steam curling from her plastic container. There was no casual banter, no shared stories from the day, just the quiet scrape of her fork against the plastic and the silent reflection in the polished surface of the table. Her tiny apartment echoed this solitude. It was meticulously clean, almost sterile, like a hospital room. Sparse furniture, practical and unadorned, offered little comfort. No photographs adorned the walls. No personal trinkets cluttered the surfaces. Her only companion was the towering stack of complex medical journals by her bedside. Their pages often turned late into the night. She'd read, her brow furrowed in concentration. The intricate diagrams and dense prose, a secret world she inhabited, far removed from the mundane realities of her nursing shifts. Her solitude wasn't a choice, perhaps, but a circumstance, a quiet acceptance of a life lived on the periphery, a life where meaningful connection seemed a distant, unattainable luxury. One crisp Saturday morning, Anya found herself with a rare day off. The city park was a kaleidoscope of vibrant autumn colors, the air crisp and invigorating. She walked aimlessly, enjoying the anonymity of the crowd, a small, worn, leather-bound notebook tucked securely in her bag. The world felt momentarily lighter, a brief respite from the ever-present weight of patient care. Her tranquility shattered with a sudden, piercing cry. A young couple stood frozen, their faces contorted in terror, as their toddler, a cherubic boy with wide, panicked eyes, clutched his throat, his face rapidly turning blue. He was choking. Chaos erupted. People rushed forward, offering useless advice, their fear palpable. The parents, overwhelmed, were paralyzed with helplessness. Anya didn't hesitate. Before conscious thought could register, her feet moved. Her exhaustion vanished, replaced by an urgent, primal focus. She pushed through the frantic crowd, her voice, though quiet, cutting through the rising panic. "He's choking. Move aside." Reaching the child, her hands moved with an almost surgical dexterity, born of years of rigorous training and an innate understanding of the human body. She positioned herself behind the child, delivering sharp, precise thrusts to his abdomen. 1, 2, 3. On the third thrust, a small, brightly colored toy popped out, landing with a soft thud on the grass. The boy gasped, then coughed, a shaky, wet sound, before bursting into tearful wails of relief. The parents, sobbing with gratitude, lunged to embrace their child. They turned to thank their savior. But Anya was already gone. She had melted back into the crowd, her face impassive, her duty done. The frantic cries of thanks faded behind her as she continued her walk, her heart still pounding from the adrenaline, but her expression serene. For her, it wasn't about recognition, it was simply about helping. As she performed the life-saving maneuver, a fleeting glimpse of her wrist revealed a faint, almost invisible scar, partially hidden by the sleeve of her casual sweater. It was a thin, silvery line, subtly raised, hinting at a past injury or perhaps a profound medical event. The omniscient narrator could observe how her hands, though accustomed to the routine tasks of a nurse taking vitals, administering medication, changing dressings possessed an almost surgical precision, a natural grace that hinted at a deeper, more intricate connection to the mechanics of the human body. It was as if her very being was molded for complex procedures, for the delicate dance between life and death that required more than just compassion. It required profound scientific understanding. Later that evening, back in her quiet apartment, Anya sat at her small, uncluttered desk. She pulled out her worn, leather-bound notebook. Its cover was smooth from countless touches, its pages filled with elegant, precise handwriting. It wasn't a diary, nor a collection of personal thoughts. Instead, it was filled with complex scientific equations, intricate diagrams of cellular structures, and detailed schematics of molecular pathways. She would occasionally glance at these pages with a pensive, distant look, her dark eyes losing themselves in the abstract beauty of her work. It was a private world, one where her mind soared far beyond the mundane confines of her nursing duties, a realm where she was not just Anya, the exhausted nurse, but Dr. A. Sharma, a name whispered with reverence in elite scientific circles, though no one in her current life knew it. This notebook, a silent repository of her true genius, was her most cherished possession, a constant, tangible link to the brilliance she kept hidden, a secret known only to herself and the universe of scientific discovery. The quiet before the storm. The hum of the fluorescent lights of the hospital would soon be replaced by the roar of revelation. The stale scent of antiseptic and overbrewed coffee clung to the oncology ward like a second skin. Anya was deep into her double shift, the relentless pace of the hospital, a dull ache in her bones. The ward was understaffed, as usual, and the air buzzed with a low current of collective exhaustion and thinly veiled frustration among the nursing team. Her colleagues, nurse supervisor Brenda Hayes and Dr. Marcus Thorne, moved through the ward with an air of self-importance that grated on Anya's nerves. Brenda, a woman whose ambition often overshadowed her empathy, barked orders with a crisp, no-nonsense tone. Dr. Thorne, a rising star in the hospital's administration, exuded an arrogant confidence, his pronouncements often delivered with a dismissive wave of his hand. Anya's focus, however, was entirely on her patients. Among them was Mrs. Eleanor Vance, a kind elderly woman with a twinkle in her eye, despite the ravages of her illness. Mrs. Vance had been stable for days, but as Anya reviewed her latest lab results, a cold knot formed in her stomach. There it was, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the serum protein levels, a marker that whispered of something far more sinister than the current diagnosis suggested. It was a detail easily overlooked by an untrained eye, or by an eye clouded by exhaustion or complacency. She approached Brenda cautiously, holding the chart open. "Brenda, I'm concerned about Mrs. Vance's labs. Her protein electrophoresis shows a slight anomaly, and her creatinine levels are trending upwards. I think we might be looking at something beyond a simple kidney strain, possibly an atypical presentation of—" Brenda cut her off with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Anya, please, we're slammed. Dr. Thorne already reviewed her panel. It's a textbook case of chemotherapy-induced renal insufficiency. You're overthinking it again. You nurses always do." Her tone was laced with condescension, a familiar jab at Anya's perceived lack of experience, despite Anya's diligence. "Just focus on administering her next round of fluids. Okay, no need to go chasing phantoms." Anya's jaw tightened, but she held her tongue. She knew Brenda wouldn't listen. Her concern for Mrs. Vance, however, outweighed her usual desire to avoid conflict. She decided to approach Dr. Thorne directly during his rounds. He swept into Mrs. Vance's room, a retinue of residents trailing behind him, their faces a mix of deference and fatigue. Anya waited patiently for a break in his booming pronouncements. "Dr. Thorne," she interjected, her voice calm but firm. "I've been monitoring Mrs. Vance closely. Her recent labs show a pattern that's highly suggestive of a rare paraneoplastic syndrome, rather than just standard renal issues. I believe we need to consider a different diagnostic approach, perhaps a specific autoantibody panel or a more targeted imaging scan. Dr. Thorne paused, his hand halfway to Mrs. Vance's chart. He turned, his eyes, usually sharp, now narrowed with irritation. A low chuckle escaped him. "Nurse Sharma," he said, his voice dripping with thinly veiled amusement. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I am the attending physician here. I assure you, my diagnosis is sound. Are you questioning my judgment? Because that Nurse Sharma sounds a lot like insubordination, and quite frankly, unprofessional." He delivered the last word with a chilling emphasis, his gaze sweeping over the residents, who shifted uncomfortably. "Your role is to follow orders, not to play diagnostician. Stick to your charting, nurse, or your continued employment here might become a matter of discussion." The threat hung in the air, cold and undeniable. His words were a direct assault on her professional integrity, an attempt to silence her. Anya felt the familiar sting of being underestimated, of her insights being dismissed simply because of her position. Years of biting her tongue, of choosing discretion over confrontation, flashed through her mind. She felt a profound weariness, the weight of ignored brilliance. But beneath it, a fierce, dormant determination began to stir. The patient's life was at stake, her hands clenched at her sides, a barely visible tremor running through them. Her ethical duty, a primal scream within her, clashed violently with her ingrained caution. She knew, with every fiber of her being, that Mrs. Vance was on the wrong path. The situation escalated dramatically. Later that day, Brenda approached Anya, her face grim. "Dr. Thorne has reassigned you. Sharma, effective immediately. You're on support duty. That means restocking supplies, assisting orderlies, and keeping the break room tidy. Dr. Thorne explicitly stated you are to stay out of the doctor's way. Consider this a warning. Your job hangs by a thread. Just do as you're told, and keep your opinions to yourself." Anya felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. This wasn't just a reprimand. It was a deliberate attempt to sideline her, to silence her, to render her invisible. They were punishing her for daring to think, for daring to care too much. As the hours dragged on, Mrs. Vance's condition worsened with alarming speed. Her breathing became labored, her skin clammy, her eyes distant. Anya, relegated to mundane tasks, watched from a distance, her heart hammering against her ribs. She saw the rushed glances from other nurses, the quick, worried consultations between junior residents, but no one seemed to grasp the true gravity of the situation. No one connected the dots the way she had. The patient was verging on a life-threatening crisis, slipping away with each passing minute. The knot in Anya's stomach twisted tighter. This was the point of no return. She couldn't stand by and watch a life be lost due to arrogance and negligence. Her silent suffering, her quiet acceptance of her undervalued role, shattered. The ethical imperative burned bright, obliterating all fear. She knew that acting would mean risking her job, her reputation, perhaps even her future. But the alternative, the death of an innocent patient, was simply unthinkable. The exhaustion faded, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and a steely resolve. She would act. She had to. The quiet nurse, hidden behind years of unassuming service, was about to step into the light, ready to fight for a life, even if it meant sacrificing her own precarious peace. The oncology ward, usually a place of hushed efficiency, erupted into a scene of frantic chaos. Mrs. Vance's monitor shrieked, its flatline tone a brutal declaration of cardiac arrest. Dr. Marcus Thorne, his face instantly paling, barked orders that seemed to trip over one another, betraying a rising panic. Nurse Supervisor Brenda Hayes, usually composed, fumbled with the defibrillator paddles, her hands trembling visibly. Residents, wide-eyed and uncertain, hovered anxiously, mirroring the confusion of their superiors. The air crackled with a desperate, uncoordinated energy, a stark contrast to the swift, decisive action needed in such moments. Anya, relegated to restocking IV bags in the supply closet, heard the piercing alarm. Her blood ran cold. She knew this was coming. The subtle lab shifts she'd tried to flag, the escalating symptoms she'd observed, they were all culminating in this critical, life-or-death moment. She burst from the closet, her eyes immediately scanning the frantic scene. Thorne was already initiating chest compressions, but his rhythm was off. His technique rushed. Brenda, meanwhile, was struggling to prepare the intubation tray, her movements hesitant. They were reacting to the emergency, but not anticipating it, and certainly not understanding the underlying cause. "She's flatlining, get the crash cart. Push 1 amp of epi," Thorne yelled, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's not working. Doctor, her rhythm isn't converting," Brenda cried, her voice strained as the paddles failed to deliver a stable rhythm. Anya watched for only a second longer, the patient's rapidly deteriorating condition screaming at her, the primal urge to save a life, to apply the knowledge that simmered beneath her unassuming facade, overwhelmed all caution, all fear of reprisal. This wasn't about her job anymore. It was about Mrs. Vance. Without a word, Anya moved. Her steps were swift, silent, cutting through the chaos like a laser. She reached the bedside, her presence an unexpected anchor in the storm. "Stop compressions," she commanded, her voice surprisingly strong, cutting through Thorne's frantic instructions. Her tone carried an undeniable authority, honed over years in high-stakes environments, even if her colleagues had never heard it. Thorne, startled, paused, his hands still hovering over Mrs. Vance's chest. "Nurse Sharma, what are you doing? Get back to the supply closet," he roared, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment at being contradicted. But Anya ignored him. Her eyes were fixed on the monitor, then on Mrs. Vance's ashen face. Her pupils are dilating. She's acidotic. This isn't a typical cardiac arrest for a chemo patient. It's an acute neurological event, likely triggered by a rare paraneoplastic syndrome that's affecting her cardiac conduction pathways. Her words, delivered with chilling precision, were a whirlwind of complex medical terminology that seemed to stun Thorne for a split second. She wasn't just stating facts. She was outlining a diagnosis, connecting the dots that he had completely missed. "What nonsense are you spouting, Sharma?" Thorne sputtered, regaining some composure, though a flicker of doubt crossed his face. "Get away from the patient." "Give me the intubation tray," Anya commanded, her hand outstretched towards a bewildered Brenda. "And get me 2 amps of magnesium sulfate, immediately, and a syringe of high-dose atropine. Stat." Her instructions were sharp, specific, demanding. She bypassed Brenda's fumbling hands, expertly grabbing the intubation scope herself. Her fingers moved with an almost ethereal grace, securing the airway in seconds, a procedure that Thorne had been struggling with. As she worked, Brenda and Thorne watched, stunned into temporary silence. The speed, the confidence, the sheer skill Anya displayed was beyond anything they had ever seen from her, or indeed, from most seasoned doctors. Her voice remained calm, guiding the stunned residents. "Adjust the ventilator settings, rapid rate, low tidal volume. We need to blow off CO2. Among the handful of witnesses was Dr. Ben Carter, a young resident known for his quiet demeanor and ethical compass. He had often observed Anya, noting her meticulous patient care and her uncanny ability to spot subtle changes. Now, he watched, mesmerized, as Anya executed a complex sequence of actions, administering the magnesium, pushing the atropine, adjusting the ventilator, all with a focus and efficiency that bespoke not just training, but profound intuitive knowledge. A gasp escaped his lips as he saw the faint, almost invisible scar on her wrist, partially exposed as her sleeve rode up during the frantic movements. It was a detail he'd seen before on images, in medical journals, a signature of a past, brilliant career, a flicker of recognition, a dawning, terrifying realization began to bloom in his mind. It couldn't be. Could it? Within minutes, an eternity in a flatlining situation. Mrs. Vance's heart monitor showed a fragile, erratic rhythm. It wasn't stable, but it was there. Anya continued to issue rapid-fire instructions for stabilizing the patient, her brow furrowed in concentration. She had pulled Mrs. Vance back from the brink. The immediate crisis averted, the ward slowly began to calm. Mrs. Vance was moved to the ICU for intensive monitoring, her prognosis still guarded, but her life undeniably saved. Thorne, his face still pale but now contorted with a mixture of fury and shame, stomped back into the ward, his eyes blazing as he found Anya. "Nurse Sharma," he hissed, grabbing her arm with surprising force. "What in God's name did you think you were doing that was reckless, unprofessional? You exceeded your scope of practice, you interfered with my patient care, and you risked that woman's life with your meddling." Brenda, though clearly shaken by the near-death experience, quickly regained her composure, her fear turning to indignant anger. "He's right. Anya, you went completely out of line. You could have killed her." Her voice trembled, but her words were firm, aligning herself with Thorne. Her own negligence was too close for comfort. She had to deflect. "I saved her life," Anya stated simply, her voice devoid of emotion, though her eyes held a profound weariness. "You got lucky," Thorne scoffed, his voice rising, trying to reassert his authority. "And luck doesn't make you a doctor. You practiced medicine without a license." Nurse Sharma: "This is a serious offense. You're fired, effective immediately. Get out of my hospital." He pointed towards the exit, his finger trembling slightly with rage. Brenda nodded. Her eyes narrowed. "And we'll be filing a formal complaint with the nursing board. You'll never work in this city again." The two adversaries stood united, their goal clear: destroy Anya's career to cover their own colossal failures. As Thorne and Brenda continued their tirade, Dr. Ben Carter, who had been lingering near the ICU entrance, felt a profound unease. He saw the fury in Thorne's eyes, the terrified complicity in Brenda's, and the quiet, almost resigned dignity in Anya's. He watched as Thorne pulled out his phone, already making calls, clearly conspiring to spin the narrative, to ensure Anya was painted as the reckless one, and their own incompetence erased from the record. He even overheard Thorne whispering to Brenda about adjusting the patient's initial diagnosis in the charts, a blatant act of falsification. Ben's gut churned. This wasn't just professional jealousy, it was a malicious cover-up. Thorne turned to a few other nurses who had gathered, drawn by the commotion. "Nurse Sharma's actions were dangerous and unauthorized. We're fortunate the patient survived despite her interference. This kind of recklessness will not be tolerated." He was attempting to control the narrative, to isolate Anya, making her actions seem haphazard and unprofessional to others who hadn't witnessed the full, terrifying brilliance of her intervention. The nurses exchanged uneasy glances, some clearly swayed by Thorne's authoritative tone, others harboring a flicker of doubt, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Anya remained silent, her gaze unwavering, not in fear, but in a profound understanding of the game being played. They wanted her gone. They wanted her silenced. But Mrs. Vance was alive. And that, for now, was all that mattered. Her life, her quiet existence as a nurse, was now shattered. But from its pieces, something new was about to emerge. The stage was set, the lines drawn. The true confrontation, the unveiling of her full identity, was now unavoidable. The news of Mrs. Vance's near-fatal incident and Nurse Sharma's unauthorized intervention ripped through St. Jude's Hospital like a virus. Dr. Marcus Thorne, a master manipulator, wasted no time in seizing control of the narrative. He swiftly convened an emergency medical ethics committee meeting, positioning himself as the aggrieved party and Anya as the reckless, rogue nurse who had endangered a patient's life. He called the local press, subtly leaking a sensationalized version of events, hinting at a dangerous nurse with a history of insubordination and a hospital facing a crisis of patient safety. The headlines screamed, fueled by Thorne's carefully crafted disinformation, painting Anya as a villain. The ethics committee meeting was scheduled for the very next morning, giving Anya barely any time to prepare. The venue was the hospital's main auditorium, a sprawling, tiered room usually reserved for grand medical conferences and prestigious lectures. It was a symbolic battleground, the very place where competence was supposed to be celebrated. But now, it would be used to discredit her. Thorne had ensured the room would be packed, not just with the ethics committee members, but also with key hospital administrators, department heads, and a scattering of curious, anxious staff members. He wanted to make an example of her. Anya felt the immense weight of isolation. Despite her undeniable act of saving Mrs. Vance, a chilling silence had fallen over the nursing staff. Fear of Thorne's wrath and the powerful influence he wielded within the hospital kept them from speaking up. Even nurses who had witnessed Anya's precise actions hesitated, their loyalty to her clashing with their need to protect their own careers. The hospital administration, eager to contain the burgeoning scandal and avoid a costly lawsuit, had already pressured Anya through a series of terse phone calls. Just apologize. Nurse Sharma. Accept a demotion. We can make this go away quietly. But Anya had refused. Her refusal a quiet defiance that only fueled Thorne's anger. She would not apologize for saving a life. Dr. Ben Carter was the only flicker of hope in the suffocating darkness. After the dramatic resuscitation, he had cornered Anya briefly, his face a mixture of awe and dawning realization. Nurse Sharma, that technique you used, the precision, it was extraordinary. I've only seen that in textbooks, in highly specialized research papers. His voice trailed off, his eyes scanning her face, searching for confirmation of a wild theory that had taken root in his mind. Anya had simply met his gaze, a fleeting, almost imperceptible nod, her only response before she was pulled away by Thorne's furious demands. But that nod, that brief shared understanding, had been enough for Ben. He spent the rest of the day in a frenzied search, cross-referencing obscure medical publications, rereading groundbreaking research from the past decade. He found it, a series of revolutionary papers on rare neurological conditions and their atypical cardiac presentations, published under the elusive name Dr. A. Sharma. The surgical precision of the described techniques, the uncanny insight into complex pathways, and the faint, almost invisible scar mentioned in one of the biographical snippets. It all matched. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The world's leading medical scientist, the brilliant mind he had revered in his academic studies, was the quiet, unassuming nurse he worked alongside. Now, as the hour of the hearing approached, Ben tried desperately to reach Anya. He called her phone, left messages, even went to her apartment, but she was unreachable, consumed by her solitary preparations. He knew Thorne would twist the facts, paint Anya as reckless, and bury her true genius. He had to help, but he felt powerless, just a resident against the formidable influence of Dr. Thorne. The night before the hearing, Anya sat in her sterile apartment, the dim glow of a single lamp illuminating her worn medical journals. The weight of the world seemed to press down on her. The public outcry, the hospital's pressure, Thorne's malicious accusations. It was a relentless barrage. She felt utterly alone, the hero facing her ultimate test with no one to stand by her side. Every moment since Mrs. Vance's crisis had been a blur of meticulous preparation. She had spent hours poring over her old research, connecting the dots between her groundbreaking work and Mrs. Vance's specific, rare symptoms. She was not just defending herself. She was defending the very principles of scientific inquiry and patient advocacy that Thorne sought to undermine. She pulled out her leather-bound notebook, its cover smooth against her calloused fingers. Inside, complex diagrams and equations danced across the pages, testaments to years of dedicated study and groundbreaking discovery. This was her truth, her legacy, her very being. And tomorrow, she would reveal it, not as a boast, but as a necessary defense, a weapon against deceit. The thought of facing Thorne, Brenda, and the entire ethics committee filled her with a profound sense of weariness, but also a quiet resolve. She wasn't fighting for recognition. She was fighting for justice, for the integrity of her profession, and for every patient who might suffer under the arrogance of a doctor like Thorne. She knew the power of the evidence she possessed, the undeniable truth hidden within her research. The time pressure was immense. Thorne had pushed for an immediate hearing, aiming to exploit the sensationalism and catch Anya off guard. The committee, already swayed by Thorne's carefully constructed narrative, was set to make a decision that could end her career, forever silencing her voice in the medical community. The looming threat of a public scandal, fueled by Thorne's press leaks, hung heavy in the air. The hospital wanted a quick resolution, preferably one that minimized their liability, even if it meant sacrificing Anya. Anya meticulously organized her evidence copies of her research papers, detailed diagrams correlating Mrs. Vance's symptoms with the specific neurological pathways she had studied, and a timeline of events from the night of the incident, complete with precise drug dosages and procedural steps she had taken. She even had her own medical notes, kept meticulously, which contradicted Thorne's falsified records. She knew this was her one chance. As dawn broke, painting the sky with hues of soft gray and rose, Anya felt a strange calm settle over her. The exhaustion was still there, a dull throb behind her eyes, but it was overshadowed by a fierce clarity of purpose. She had faced greater challenges in the solitary world of scientific discovery, breakthroughs that had seemed impossible. This was just another barrier to overcome, another truth to reveal. She dressed in a simple, professional suit, a stark contrast to her usual scrubs, though her hands, calloused from nursing duties, still looked out of place in the formal fabric. She glanced at the faint scar on her wrist, a silent reminder of the arduous journey that had shaped her. It was a mark of survival, a testament to her resilience. As she stepped out of her apartment, the city was waking up, a low hum of activity already filling the streets. She walked with quiet determination towards the hospital, the very building that had become her prison, and soon, her arena. The knowledge of her true identity, a secret held so tightly for so long, now felt like a potent force, ready to be unleashed. The air was heavy with anticipation, the stage was set, and the ultimate test was about to begin. The quiet nurse, scorned and underestimated, was about to become the legend. The hospital's main auditorium buzzed with a tense, expectant hum, the air thick with anticipation. Every seat was filled, a sea of faces reflecting a spectrum of emotions, skepticism, curiosity, apprehension. Dr. Marcus Thorne, impeccably dressed and radiating a practiced confidence, stood at the podium. His voice, smooth and resonant, filled the room as he presented his case against Nurse Anya Sharma, meticulously constructing a narrative of recklessness and insubordination. He used medical jargon to obscure his own errors, painting Anya's life-saving intervention as a dangerous deviation from established protocols, a stroke of sheer, undeserved luck. Her actions were a flagrant disregard for patient safety, a direct challenge to the chain of command, and frankly, Thorne paused for dramatic effect, his gaze sweeping across the committee members. An egregious instance of practicing medicine without a license. Such behavior cannot and will not be tolerated at St. Jude's. He concluded with a flourish, his eyes glinting with a triumphant malice as they briefly met Anya's, who sat composed and still in the front row. Next, Nurse Supervisor Brenda Hayes took the stand. Her voice, though trembling slightly, was firm as she fabricated details, twisting events to corroborate Thorne's story. She emphasized Anya's disruptive questions and her unwillingness to follow orders, portraying her as a difficult and dangerous employee. "I warned her," Brenda stated, her voice quivering with feigned distress. "But she just wouldn't listen. She's a loose cannon." Anya watched them, her face devoid of emotion. She registered Thorne's calculated deceit, Brenda's fearful complicity. The words washed over her, but beneath her placid exterior, her mind was a steel trap, meticulously recalling every detail, every fact, every piece of irrefutable truth. Her eyes, usually veiled with fatigue, now held an unwavering intensity, a quiet fire that few in the room noticed. Finally, it was Anya's turn. She rose slowly, deliberately, her movements economical and precise. She walked to the podium, her steps quiet yet commanding, a stark contrast to Thorne's flamboyant entrance. She looked out at the assembled faces, the skeptical committee members, the wary administrators, the curious colleagues. And then, her eyes settled on Thorne and Brenda, who sat side by side, their expressions a mixture of smugness and contempt. "Thank you," Anya began, her voice calm, clear, and surprisingly strong, cutting through the residual murmurs in the room. "I understand the gravity of the accusations leveled against me, and I am here to address them, not with rhetoric, but with facts." She started by meticulously dissecting Mrs. Vance's case. Her voice, though even, held an underlying current of profound knowledge. She explained the patient's rare condition, the perineoplastic syndrome, in terms of its subtle indicators and atypical cardiac manifestations. She described the precise, minute shifts in Mrs. Vance's initial lab results, the very anomalies Thorne had dismissed. Her explanation was clear, concise, and scientifically rigorous, yet accessible enough for the non-specialists on the committee to follow. These were not just chemotherapy-induced renal issues, as Dr. Thorne diagnosed, Anya stated, her gaze unwavering as she looked directly at him. They were early warning signs, indicative of a much more complex, underlying systemic issue impacting the patient's cardiac conduction pathways. The standard treatment protocols, while appropriate for typical cases, were not only ineffective here, but actively exacerbated her condition, leading to the cardiac arrest. A murmur rippled through the room. Some committee members exchanged uneasy glances. Thorne's smug expression began to falter, a faint line of apprehension creasing his brow. Brenda shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Anya then detailed the chaotic moments during the resuscitation. She described Thorne's frantic, misdirected efforts, Brenda's fumbling, and then, with chilling precision, she recounted her own actions. She didn't boast, she merely stated the steps she took, the specific medications she called for, the exact dosages, the unique intubation technique she employed, and the ventilator adjustments she made. Each step was explained with an exactness that bordered on clinical instruction, proving her profound understanding of the crisis. "My actions were not reckless or lucky," Anya asserted, her voice gaining a quiet intensity. "They were a series of calculated, precise interventions based on a differential diagnosis that, unfortunately, was overlooked." A committee member, a seasoned physician, interrupted. "Nurse Sharma, while your explanation is compelling, it describes a level of specialized medical knowledge far beyond that of a registered nurse, and the technique you describe, particularly the rapid sequence intubation, with targeted pharmacological intervention for an atypical cardiac event. It's highly specialized, rarely performed outside of a very specific research setting. How could you possess such expertise?" The skepticism in his voice was palpable, a reflection of the collective doubt that still lingered. The air in the auditorium thickened. A collective breath held. This was it. The precipice. The moment when all Thorne's manipulations seemed on the verge of succeeding. When the weight of the impossible hung heavy in the air. Thorne's eyes gleamed with renewed triumph, a sneer forming on his lips. Brenda nodded, a silent, "I told you so" in her gaze. Anya met the committee member's gaze, a subtle, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. She reached into her briefcase, which lay by the podium, and slowly, deliberately, pulled out a stack of meticulously bound documents. The paper rustled softly in the hushed room. "You are absolutely correct, Doctor," Anya said, her voice now resonating with an authority that left no room for doubt. "Such expertise is indeed highly specialized. It comes from years of dedicated research, of groundbreaking discoveries in the very field that pertains to Mrs. Vance's condition." She laid the documents on the podium, pushing the top one forward. It was a research paper, its cover pristine, bearing the official seal of a prestigious international medical journal. The title, boldly printed, detailed a revolutionary new approach to rare neurological paraneoplastic syndromes and their cardiac complications. Then, Anya's finger traced the author's name, printed clearly, Dr. A. Sharma. A collective gasp swept through the auditorium, a ripple of disbelief that quickly turned into utter astonishment. Whispers erupted, a torrent of murmurs. Dr. Ben Carter, who had been sitting rigidly in his seat, jaw clenched, felt a wave of profound realization wash over him. His eyes widened, a silent, "Oh my God," forming on his lips as he saw the name, the research, and the faint, almost invisible scar on Anya's wrist as her hand moved. He had known, he had suspected, but to see it confirmed, so definitively, so publicly. His face flushed with a mix of shock, awe, and immense burgeoning pride. Thorne's face, which moments before had been smug, turned a ghastly shade of white. His eyes darted from the paper to Anya, then around the room, desperately searching for an escape, for a way to deny the undeniable. Brenda, beside him, looked utterly bewildered. Her eyes glazed with a dawning, terrifying comprehension. Her carefully constructed lies crumbled into dust. Anya allowed the murmurs to subside slightly, then continued, her voice now powerful, carrying the weight of undisputed authority. "This is my research, published 2 years ago. It outlines the precise diagnostic markers and treatment protocols for atypical presentations of paraneoplastic syndromes, the very condition Mrs. Vance suffers from. The specific intubation and drug titration I employed are detailed within these pages, techniques I developed and pioneered." She paused, her gaze locking onto Thorne's. "Dr. Thorne, you called my actions reckless. I call them evidence-based. You called them unqualified. I call them the culmination of 2 decades of study and dedication. And you called me a nurse who practiced medicine without a license. I assure you, I am Dr. Anya Sharma, and I am, in fact, the world's leading medical scientist in this very field." The auditorium erupted. The previous murmurs swelled into a roar, a wave of stunned exclamations and frenzied applause. Flashbulbs popped blindingly. Reporters, initially scribbling notes on Thorne's accusations, now frantically rewrote their entire stories, their faces alight with the thrill of a monumental scoop. Committee members, their faces transitioning from incredulity to profound admiration, rose to their feet. Some were openly gaping, others wiping away tears of awe. Thorne, utterly defeated, slumped in his chair, his head in his hands, his body trembling, his career, his reputation, everything he had built on a foundation of arrogance and deceit, was now irrevocably shattered. Brenda, beside him, was frozen, her eyes wide with a combination of fear and utter devastation. Anya stood tall at the podium, her quiet demeanor replaced by an undeniable radiance. Her victory was complete. It wasn't just a personal vindication, it was a profound societal acknowledgement of her genius, a triumph of truth over deception, of integrity over arrogance. The exhausted nurse, scorned and dismissed, had not only saved a life but had also unveiled herself as a luminary. A legend returned, casting a brilliant light on the dark corners of prejudice and malpractice. The catharsis in the room was electric, the collective gasp of realization, a thunderous affirmation of her profound and undeniable genius. The aftermath of Dr. Anya Sharma's revelation was nothing short of a seismic event that reverberated through the very foundations of St. Jude's Hospital and sent shockwaves across the national medical community. The initial stunned silence in the auditorium had given way to a cacophony of urgent whispers, the frantic clicking of camera shutters, and the rapid-fire questions of bewildered reporters. The story of the exhausted nurse unmasking herself as a world-leading medical scientist was a sensational narrative, eclipsing all other news. Dr. Marcus Thorne's downfall was swift and absolute, a spectacular plummet from his self-proclaimed pinnacle of authority. The Ethics Committee, now fully enlightened and acutely aware of their near-catastrophic error in judgment, moved with unprecedented speed. Within hours of Anya's presentation, Thorne was suspended, his medical license immediately revoked pending a full, rigorous investigation. The evidence Anya provided, combined with additional testimony from Dr. Ben Carter regarding Thorne's attempts to falsify records and his history of negligence, painted a damning picture. The investigation quickly unearthed a pattern of medical malpractice, a trail of patient neglect, and a history of professional misconduct that had been meticulously covered up through intimidation and manipulation. Thorne lost everything: his prestigious position, his reputation, his ability to practice medicine, and, soon, his freedom, as criminal charges for gross negligence and fraud were prepared. His ambition, once his greatest asset, became the architect of his ruin, a fitting end for a man whose arrogance had blinded him to the truth. Nurse Supervisor Brenda Hayes, though not as deeply implicated as Thorne, faced her own significant consequences. Her complicity in dismissing Anya's concerns, her negligence in overseeing patient care, and her active participation in Thorne's attempts to discredit Anya led to an immediate disciplinary hearing. While her nursing license was not revoked, she was stripped of her supervisor title, demoted to a basic nursing role, and subjected to mandatory retraining focused on ethics, patient advocacy, and respectful communication. The humiliation was profound. Brenda, her face etched with genuine remorse, offered a tearful public apology to Anya and to the entire nursing staff, acknowledging her fear and her grave errors in judgment. Over the following months, she was observed making genuine attempts to change, actively participating in Anya's new initiatives, perhaps as a way to atone for her past mistakes. Her transformation, from haughty supervisor to a humbled, dedicated nurse, served as a quiet testament to the possibility of redemption within the institution. For Anya Sharma, the resolution brought not just vindication, but an avalanche of opportunities. The hospital administration, desperate to salvage their reputation and capitalize on the sudden influx of positive media attention, offered her an unprecedented position, head of research and innovation. This was far more than a mere promotion. It was a blank check for her genius. She was granted an unlimited budget, a state-of-the-art laboratory, and the authority to assemble her own dedicated team of scientists and medical professionals. The entire hospital, once a place where her brilliance was stifled, was now being transformed into a pioneering center of medical excellence, all under her visionary leadership. This new role was the ultimate validation of her life's work, providing her with the platform she had silently yearned for: the ability to develop groundbreaking treatments, to push the boundaries of medical science, and to directly impact countless lives. The most profound shift, however, occurred in Anya's personal and professional relationships. The quiet, almost invisible nurse was now a revered figure. Colleagues who had once scorned her now approached her with respect, even awe. Nurses who had doubted her now sought her guidance, Among them, Dr. Ben Carter stood out. He became Anya's most trusted protege, his loyalty unwavering. Days after the hearing, he sought her out in her new, sprawling office, a space that felt vast after her cramped apartment. Dr. Sharma, Ben began, his voice still tinged with awe. I just wanted to tell you how incredibly sorry I am that it took a public spectacle for me to truly understand. I always saw your diligence, your care for patients, but I never grasped the sheer depth of your brilliance. I'm truly honored to have witnessed what you did, and to be here now. Anya smiled, a genuine, warm smile that softened the fatigue in her eyes. Ben, she said, motioning for him to sit. You saw. That's what matters. You had integrity. You weren't swayed by the prevailing narrative. You sought the truth, even when it was inconvenient. That kind of spirit is rare, and it's what we need more of in medicine. Their conversation flowed easily, a blend of professional strategy and personal reflection. They discussed the hospital's future, the research projects Anya envisioned, and the ethical dilemmas that constantly challenged the medical field. It's a long road ahead, Ben mused, leaning back in his chair, a sense of quiet determination on his face. Cleaning up years of stagnation, rebuilding trust. Indeed, Anya agreed, her gaze drifting to the panoramic window overlooking the city, a city that now felt intimately connected to her purpose. But now, we have the resources, and more importantly, the freedom to do what's right, to prioritize patients over ego and science over politics. We have to change the culture. Ben, teach a new generation that true leadership isn't about power, but about service and unwavering integrity. Ben nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. And Mrs. Vance, she's recovering beautifully, Anya confirmed, a flicker of profound satisfaction in her eyes. She's stable, and the targeted therapy is working. She'll make a full recovery, thanks to the early intervention. A living testament, perhaps, to what happens when truth prevails. The new calm that settled over Anya was not a return to her former quiet isolation, but a profound sense of purpose. Her internal conflict, the struggle between remaining hidden and revealing her true self, had been irrevocably resolved. She had embraced her power, not out of vanity, but out of necessity and a deep ethical commitment. The exhaustion lingered at times, a chronic companion from years of overwork, but it was now fueled by inspiration, not weariness. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a beacon, a leader, an architect of change. Her journey from the shadows to the spotlight had not been sought, but it had been embraced, and in doing so, she found a peace more profound than any she had known in her solitude. The path ahead was clear, illuminated by the bright promise of discovery and compassionate care. 5 years after the dramatic revelations, the city, once a sprawling expanse of anonymity and overlooked potential, had truly blossomed. The sky above St. Jude's Hospital, once frequently clouded with the weight of unaddressed issues, now seemed perpetually clearer, its blue expanse reflecting the renewed hope and trust that permeated every street and every home. The very air vibrated with a sense of purpose and genuine community, a stark contrast to the quiet indifference that had once defined it. This palpable shift was the enduring legacy of Dr. Anya Sharma, a testament to how one individual's unwavering commitment to integrity could transform an entire system, from the ground up. Dr. Anya Sharma's life, once a stark tableau of solitude and professional exhaustion, was now a vibrant tapestry woven with purpose, connection, and profound impact. Her small apartment, though still her primary residence, no longer felt sparsely furnished. It held the warmth of a life lived fully, adorned with thoughtful gifts from grateful patients and small, cherished mementos from her global travels. There were vibrant tapestries on the walls, a testament to cultures touched by her work, and comfortable armchairs inviting conversation. The stack of complex medical journals by her bedside had been joined by popular science books, fiction, and even a well-worn cookbook, reflecting a broadened personal life. She no longer ate her meager, prepackaged dinner alone in the humming break room. Her meals were often shared, sometimes with Dr. Ben Carter, her steadfast protege, debating complex research problems late into the night. Other times, she'd host small, intimate gatherings with her new colleagues and friends, the laughter and lively discussion filling her once silent home. The distant beeps of monitors were still a part of her world, but now they represented lives saved, breakthroughs achieved, and a future brimming with possibility. Her morning coffee ritual, once a solitary escape, had evolved into a beloved community engagement. At the local cafe, baristas now knew her order by heart, and fellow patrons, recognizing the quiet woman who had revolutionized the city's healthcare, offered warm greetings and genuine smiles. It was a tangible connection, a constant reminder of the trust she had painstakingly rebuilt. Often, Comandante Elena Rodriguez from the city's newly reformed police department would join her for coffee, their conversations spanning far beyond local concerns, discussing citywide initiatives and the interdisciplinary nature of urban well-being. Their shared commitment to public service had forged an unlikely but powerful alliance, proving that meaningful connections could emerge from the most unexpected places. St. Jude's Hospital itself had become a beacon of medical innovation and compassionate care, a far cry from the stifling environment she first encountered. Under Anya's visionary leadership as head of research and innovation, the hospital had pioneered several groundbreaking treatments, particularly in oncology and rare disease management, directly impacting countless lives. Her work had not only advanced medical science, but had also fundamentally reshaped the hospital's culture. The hierarchical arrogance that once defined its corridors had been replaced by a collaborative spirit. Doctors and nurses worked as true partners, and patient well-being was genuinely prioritized over ego or profit. The implementation of her new initiatives was seamless and highly effective. The Patient First Pathway program, which streamlined diagnostic processes and ensured comprehensive, multidisciplinary care, had drastically improved patient outcomes and satisfaction. The Compassionate Care Training Initiative, which Anya personally oversaw, had recentered the focus of medical staff on empathy and ethical practice, fostering a more supportive and humane environment for both patients and staff. Incidents of medical negligence had become almost non-existent, and the hospital's reputation soared, attracting top talent from around the globe. Anya's influence extended far beyond the hospital walls. Her groundbreaking research, once confined to obscure journals, had become universally acclaimed. Her papers now published in leading medical publications and cited globally. Her name, Dr. A. Sharma, was synonymous with medical excellence and ethical leadership. She was a sought-after speaker at international conferences, her lectures inspiring thousands of aspiring scientists and medical professionals. Yet, despite her global acclaim, she remained grounded, her focus firmly rooted in practical applications and real-world impact. One of Anya's proudest achievements was the establishment of the Global Health Innovators Fellowship. Using a substantial portion of her personal research grants and influence, she created a unique program that funded promising young scientists and medical students from underserved regions, bringing them to St. Jude's to learn from her team. Upon completion, these fellows would return to their home countries, equipped with cutting-edge knowledge and resources to address local health challenges. She personally mentored many of these fellows, dedicating countless hours to fostering their intellectual growth and instilling in them the values of integrity and compassion. In a sun-drenched, state-of-the-art laboratory, a few miles from the hospital, Anya stood amidst a bustling cohort of her fellows. The air hummed with the quiet whir of centrifuges and the murmur of focused discussion. A young fellow, Dr. Elias Benyam, from a remote village in East Africa, approached her, his eyes shining with excitement. Dr. Sharma, Elias began, holding up a small vial containing a new compound. We've had a breakthrough on the malaria-resistant strain. The preliminary data looks incredibly promising for a novel therapeutic agent. Anya took the vial, her fingers tracing its smooth surface. Excellent work, Elias. This is precisely why we're here, to turn the seemingly impossible into life-saving realities. She looked at him, her gaze piercing yet encouraging. Remember what I always say, every single patient, every single community, deserves the best science we can offer, no matter where they are from. Elias nodded, a deep sense of purpose etched on his face. You taught us that, Dr. Sharma. That true science isn't just about discovery, but about dignity. You showed us that integrity in a lab is as crucial as a steady hand in surgery. As she spoke with Elias, Anya's gaze drifted to the other fellows, a diverse group from all corners of the globe, engaged in various research projects, their faces alight with dedication. She often led masterclasses herself, not just on complex medical topics, but on the ethics of scientific discovery and the importance of unwavering patient advocacy. She organized annual medical missions to underserved communities, bringing essential healthcare services and training local medical staff. The faint scar on her wrist, a silvery line that once symbolized a hidden past, was now a quiet testament to her journey, a mark of the challenges she had overcome to reach this point of profound impact. Later that evening, as the city lights began to twinkle against the darkening sky, Anya stood on the observation deck of the hospital's new research wing, a silent sentinel overlooking the vibrant metropolis. The hum of the city, once a symbol of her isolation, now felt like a chorus of purpose, a symphony of lives she had touched. In her hand, she held a first edition of her most renowned textbook, The Intricate Dance Paraneoplastic Syndromes and Beyond. It was a weighty tome, a culmination of her life's work. She ran her thumb over the embossed title, then flipped to the opening pages, her fingers finding a small, personal inscription she had added. The words were a quiet dedication to all those who were once unseen, unheard, and to the unwavering pursuit of truth. The book, once represented by her worn, secret notebook filled with hidden genius, was now a universally acclaimed textbook, a beacon of knowledge shared openly with the world. It encapsulated her journey from obscurity to global recognition, a symbol of courage, perseverance, and the enduring transformative power of knowledge and boundless compassion. Anya closed the book, holding it close. The faint scar on her wrist, partially visible as her sleeve rode up, was still there, a humble reminder of the nurse she once was. But her hands, now, were confidently shaping the future of medicine. One discovery, one patient, one inspired mind at a time. The second spring had truly arrived, vibrant and full of promise. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.